This is The Secret Teachings, tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Thank you, Russell Stewart, for joining us. All G, thank you for joining us as well. Alrighty, so tonight, for the next 90 minutes roughly, we have Ryder Lee with us from Raised by Giants. You can find him on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube right now, you can just type in Raised by Giants and you should be able to find Ryder Lee. He's been on the show many times. He's a good friend of mine. And he's made a handful of really good documentaries. The Clockwork Shining documentary, that was a really, really good documentary. Some stuff in that documentary that it's probably kind of related to the show tonight. So anyway, let's bring Ryder on the broadcast. Ryder, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you being here.
And I'm looking forward to talking about this because this is basically the basis of my new documentary, Psychic Agent, The Real Life Stranger Things, which should be out within 2 to 3 months on Amazon Prime and Apple TV Plus. Kind of what got me on this track was going through all of the MK Ultra programs. Okay, so we know that there were 149 sub-projects to MK Ultra, and there were several. Richard Helm of the CIA, the director at the time, ordered that the MK Ultra documents be destroyed. And the only reason that we have any of the documentation on MK Ultra was because around 8,000 pages were found inside of some financial documents that weren't destroyed by the CIA. But there was reported that there was more sub-projects of MK Ultra than just the 149 that we are privy to. Now, a few of the sub-projects I found very interesting because 4 of them focused solely on psychic abilities and parapsychology, hypnosis, and what would later be called remote viewing. Now, there was another sub-project that involved children. There was a few of them, actually, but one of them in particular was Sub-Project 103 in 1959, which was called the Children's International Summer Village, where all these kids were brought together to be at a summer camp. The CIA was studying them to see how they communicate with each other when they're in, common groups. And it was also to study young children who may be of interest to the agency. Now, if you fast forward a little bit, there's this tape that's been going around online that says something like, "You should be hearing my voice in your right ear." Now, this has been triggering a lot of people. They remember hearing this in public school. They remember going through a lot of these weird and strange tests in public school. They would be taken out of class, taken to a separate part of school that would be like a separate building sometimes. Sometimes it was a different classroom, but a lot of times it was just a completely separate building adjacent from the school itself. They would be sat down, they would do hearing tests, they would do vision tests, they would do tests with like blocks, they would do Rorschach tests, they would do tests with cards, like cards that would have a symbol on them. They would be asked, "Oh, well, what's going to be the next thing on the card?" Which has led people to believe that this is like a testing of, psychic abilities within the kids, right? Tests with ropes. They would be told to drink some sort of substance, like a very liquidy substance. Some people believe that it was a pink Pepto-Bismol type drink. Other people remember it being a yellow, thick Pepto-Bismol like drink, but they were like, I don't know, like just in these, like, those little paper cups that they just like look like shooters that they would be that they would have to take. And this coincides with like the drugging of kids. Like nobody knows, and that's the thing, is within those tests, after they take the substance, they don't really remember anything else after that. Okay, so it's very difficult to figure out exactly what was going on, but a lot of people remember the testing, going through the testing, strange testing. Some of it was like reading, and this leads some people to believe that it was like ADHD testing and stuff like that, which that's not out of the realm of possibility. But a lot of these programs were called gifted programs. They were called MGM, which is really interesting because the entire MGM show with the, what was that?
Oh, that's the network it's on, right? MGM Plus.
The Institute, right?
Institute,
MGM, Mentally Gifted Minds, the Institute on MGM Plus, which is.
Let me ask you a question, Ryder. Those substances, whatever those substances were, and we could probably just sit here and try to break down the various possibilities of what those kinds of tests would be. We have a listener in the chat named Joe Ryder who said that they remember those tests and that he had those tests done. I don't remember anything like that personally for me, but maybe I'm too young. But my question is, the way that you describe those Pepto-Bismol-like substances, based on what people are saying that they experienced, there's a lot of things, because we're dealing with kids, that it could be a misremembering of something. It could be inflated as a story because of all the pop culture and the comics and movies and TV shows. But those things also can be based on things like Stranger Things is. So anyway, the point is, could those substances, do you think that maybe they could be some sort of ergot-like substance, hallucinatory, psychedelic-like substances? Because they use those for adults in these kinds of programs, and humans have used these for thousands of years to induce what we would probably call psychic type abilities and to speak with spirits. If you give that to children, that would absolutely enhance, theoretically, any sort of those types of natural abilities already. That's my first thought. What do you think of that, or do you know anything about that?
Yes, it seems like some sort of hallucinogenic substance, and they would also be asked to put on goggles, like 3D goggles. What would the 3D goggles be for? It would be to change your perception while you're drugged to get you to see things that you normally wouldn't see. And I can give an example of this. When I was really young, when I was growing up, I would see things in my room every night, like entities would like come out of the walls. Now that might sound crazy, whatever people want to think, but I told my parents about this. It was like every night I see these entities, they come out of the walls and surround me in my bed every night. My parents thought that something was wrong with me. They took me to the doctor. Okay, the doctor says that there wasn't anything wrong with me, and he handed me this flashcard. I don't know, it was probably as big as this piece of notepad paper. Okay. And it had these bullseyes on it. It had a big bullseye, then a small bullseye, and then it was like 4 different circles within circles. And he said, can you make this bullseye become 3D? Can you make the bullseye pop up off of the card? And I couldn't do it at that time. And he was like, well, when you can do it, come back and see me. And it was like it was like really fuzzy. Like it was almost like it was 3D on the card already. Like if you were to take your 3D glasses off and watch a 3D movie, how it's like super blurry. That's what the card looked like. And as the bullseyes got bigger on the little flash card, they got clearer. Okay, so I'm like putting 2 and 2 together here. And if these people were forced to put on some 3D goggles and then they were, given some sort of substance, would that be to trigger some sort of abilities? I mean, because we know that
they're three. You say they're 3D goggles because usually that kind of stuff works with a movie that's rendered to be 3D. But obviously, if you put them on, they don't work when you walk outside. They're already 3-dimensional. So what does that? What does 3D goggles mean then?
For the people that can't see what they're supposed to be seeing.
So maybe they're not necessarily 3D goggles, but there's some sort of enhancing device to enhance the visions. It almost sounds like you're giving someone it sounds like an acid trip, but then they're trying to enhance or make the acid trip even more real by putting some kind of device over people's eyes.
Right. So if you couldn't do something, right, it's just like with technology. Technology gives us a leap to be able to talk to each other while you're in Japan and I'm in the United States, right?
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to do that without technology. Well, some people wouldn't be able to possibly unlock these psychic abilities that they have within them without a little nudge, without a little help, without a little technology, right? And that's just 100% pure theory. I have just based on what happened to me and me remembering those bullseyes on that flashcard that were like super blurry. But there's several instances of that with people being drugged and then experimented on, and it's shown a lot in the Institute on MGM Plus with children. But there's like the Ames Leaf Room. Have you ever heard of the Ames Leaf Room?
I have not.
It was created by Dr. Ames. He created this, which was funded and on contract by the Office of Naval Intelligence, well, Office of Naval Research, where he would take college students into this room that just had leaves all over it. You can Google it. You can just type in Ames Leaf Room. And he would give them LSD. Then he would put these goggles over their head and then have them sit in this weird room that he created. It's called the Ames Leaf Room. Okay. So, and people would have like the worst trips of their lives in this room that's made out of leaves, tripping on LSD with weird goggles over their head. They would end up in the emergency room. Okay, so and that's a 100% real story of the Ames Leaf Room. So, and that was happening on a college campus, right? So there is evidence of some of the things that people are remembering. It's just difficult to track it into actually being inside of public schools. But the weird part about it, Ryan, is that voice that I was mentioning of the tape when people would put the headphones on and they would go through these hearing tests in public school, which is the voice that comes over. You should be hearing my voice in your right ear. That is the Monroe Institute Gateway tapes. That voice is that's a real thing that's triggering people. That's the Monroe Institute Gateway tapes. The Hemi-Sync Gateway tapes is to induce an out-of-body experience, which Robert Monroe is connected to the Stargate remote viewing unit that the DIA and Army Intelligence was doing. Army Intelligence paid Robert Monroe thousands of dollars to send their Army assets to the Monroe Institute to study under Robert Monroe. So there's a connection here. So how and why were these gateway tapes put into public school? Did SRI have something to do with this? Because SRI was a part of this entire thing too. They were the original scientists that were put down to study remote viewing and was funded by the CIA and by the government, by the Air Force, by the NSA. And there's this document that I have here. I'm going to actually share the screen here really quickly. Window. This is from the Sunstreak DIA Army Intelligence Program, which was for remote viewing. They were using remote viewing to collect intelligence data on foreign targets during the Cold War. It started in 1978 and ended in 1995.
Is Sunstreak the one that reportedly, supposedly, if this is the one I'm remembering, where the Ark of the Covenant was also reportedly found in the 80s? Is that the same program?
Yes. But it is the same program as one of the very first programs that was a Grill Flame that was started as well. It was just renamed. So several times since 1978, Army Intelligence and DIA had been split, and then they had their separate programs, and then they would come back together, and then they would split again. That would cause another name change, and then they would come back together, and then that would create another name change. So it was Sunstreak for a really long time, and then in 1992 it was changed to the Stargate Project by Dale Graff, which was an operations manager that's going to be in my documentary talking about this and how and why he changed the name to Stargate. And then it was supposed to be given back to the CIA, which was funding it in 1995, and then the CIA shut the program down and said no intelligence data had ever been collected from the program, which is a lie. Once you once you read through all these documents, you'll see that the remote viewers were on target with almost everything. I mean, there's wind speed, there's detailed drawings of the location that they're remote viewing with their mind, their psychic abilities. I mean, it definitely worked. And that's what also piqued my interest. Why would they shut down a program that was, on all accounts, successful?
Repurposing the program is usually what happens. They repurpose it, they rename it, they reassign people, or it goes black.
That's right. That's exactly right. They one, they either already had a program. Two, they reassigned the program. Three, it went so dark that nobody is ever going to find out anything about it. And the evolving nature of what remote viewing can become, you can do so much with remote viewing. It's not just, an intelligence data collection or spying for the government or seeing what somebody else is doing. There's so many other levels and layers to remote viewing that can be done. I mean, there's outbounder experiments. There's which is the SRI called him outbounder, the DIA called him what was the name? They called him a different name, but it was essentially the same thing. That they would have the remote viewers remote viewing a certain individual, and then the remote viewer would literally be able to see through their eyes. Okay, and then if you were to take that a step further, and then there's like by location. There's a very advanced form of remote viewing that Ingo Swann created that was called perfect site integration. That was essentially straight up by location. You could literally bilocate your physical body to another place on the earth, and you would be there and you would be able to influence the environment. So it gets way more advanced, and they want you to stop at, the government. They want you to stop at this intelligence data collection that the remote viewers were doing for DIA and Army intelligence. They want you to stop there.
Like, biolocation is a theoretical scientific concept. I think that would also apply to perhaps understanding what a ghost is. I've heard this theory for a very long time, and I think that it's probably it's an adequate potential explanation for ghosts or something similar to ghosts.
Yeah, why does unexplained activity or paranormal activity have to be of a dead spirit?
Well, usually,
more than likely, probably from somebody that's living.
And usually it has to do with and is associated with heightened emotional states. Your stress, anxiety, fear, terror, even sexual tension and energy, psychic abilities, telekinesis, moving objects with your mind, etc. Those even pyrotechnics. What do they call it? Pyro techniques. Even those kinds of things, being able to manipulate fire, the elements, or whatever the case is, comes from those heightened emotional states. So there's a connection between those two things. Although I was wondering, I want to ask, you're a perfect person to ask this question, because I'm thinking of the Pentagon's recent announcement that they fabricated many of the UFO stories and narratives. And I don't trust the Pentagon, but this has been a theory in ufology for a long time. It's also documented back in the 50s that was one of the goals, not necessarily the Pentagon, but that the media, the military, intelligence was going to do this. So when we learn that, now there's like an open acknowledgement that yes, the military perpetrated these myths, or took real stories and turned them into myths and or things they didn't know what they were. And I'm wondering if the same thing has come to your mind in researching for your new documentary, has come to your mind about things like remote viewing and things like people remembering having gone to these gifted children test programs in public schools, that perhaps some of this stuff, people say, hey, I remember that. Well, we do know, psychologically speaking, people misremember a lot, and it can be traced directly back to things that you're entertained by, or it can be tracked back to states of emotional instability, people that are missing certain things in their life, so they want to be part of something, or it's an excuse for why their life isn't what it could be. I mean, that's very real. So I get the point is, my question is, just like with UFOs, I think it's possible, but my question to you is, do you think it's possible? Do you know anything about it, or do you have a theory on it? Maybe that a lot of that stuff that we're hearing today, about those memories aren't just the same types of mythos that were promoted by the military for UFOs. They're just doing this now with psychic abilities, or with paranormal experiences, or it's not part of a long line of similar disinformation that's been around for decades. Do you understand what I'm asking? Do you have a thought on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I understand that. And I could 100% understand someone coming at it from that angle. That's why I'm trying to get down to what factual information can I glean from any of this stuff. Like, do we have any documentation? I mean, obviously, there really were gifted programs. Now, whether those gifted programs were for trying to find psychic kids to shepherd them and herd them into a government facility, we don't know. Okay, but there's 100% gifted programs. There's too many people that remember being in a gifted program for them not to be a gifted program. And I heard about this as I was growing up as well. There were gifted programs in my school. I was never a part of it, but I know that there were. Almost every school in the 90s, toward the end of the 80s, into the 90s, had gifted programs. Now, you were never told what the gifted programs were. The people told their parents that they were a part of, like, that they were super smart and that they need to be put into extra classes, like extracurricular activity classes, because they were scoring above average. Okay, now that could be mixed up and confused with some sort of weird government testing as well. But as far as documentation, we have this document from the Sunstreak remote viewing program that says right here, only one scientific claim of detection of remote viewing is known. Chinese scientists claim to have detected remote viewing during their experiments with children. Do you have this at the bottom of your screen?
I do not see it on my screen. Let me see if I can pull it up.
It should be at the bottom of your, I hit it on the share, so you should be able to just bring it up down near the bottom.
Yes, it's allowing me now. It wasn't allowing me at first. It is now. So you can see that on the screen now. Sunstreak.
Okay, so data on these experiments is insufficient to validate this. Now, this part down here looks like it tried to be redacted, like someone tried to just mark this out with like a pen. It looks like it's been marked over like twice. And it says work to replicate these experiments, however, is going on at SRI.
So they shut the program down because it wasn't providing anything of value, but then whatever value there was in it was continued at SRI. They tried to replicate the experiments. Is that what I'm to understand?
Right, but we don't know if that means replicating the experiments with children. That's just stated above here, with the Chinese have detected remote viewing during their experiments with children, which is 100% accurate. They were doing those experiments. Whenever you turned around, I don't know, I think it was like 13 or 14, you were then kicked out of the program. They had no use for you anymore in China. And currently there are programs in the UK that are training kids with psychic abilities. They'll put blindfolds on them and they'll have them they would be naming what caller is there when they can't even see it. It's 100% real program. Now, that's not a nefarious program. That's just a program for parents that think that their kids have some sort of extrasensory perception. It doesn't involve school or anything. It's just like like a sports class that you would take your kid to, or a gymnastics class or taekwondo. It's like an extracurricular activity class that's going on in the UK, where that is training kids how to be psychic. Okay,
I think
now
it's a lot easier today because of the internet and because of widespread, cheap, easily accessible communication. But if you go back a couple of decades, if you go back into the 90s, I don't see why, theoretically, why it would be even a second thought that militaries, corporations, governments looking for, a new generation of, or people they can train to be a new generation of specialized whatever, and they go to schools and they find people that test very high and test in a certain way, and then they recruit them or their families into those programs, whatever those programs are. They don't have to be psychic, but they just could be people that you think that are really smart that you want working at the CIA.
that's right. That's exactly right.
It's like
That's what
athletes,
it is.
right? It's like
Yes.
athletes at schools. You go recruit athletes. You're telling me the military or the intelligence community or the government hasn't done that with really smart people? Of course they have. Some countries, they force you to do it. In the Soviet Union or in China, they would just kidnap people and force you to participate, scientists, etc., force you to make things and perform experiments. So yeah, this is
And that's what's happening. The people that I have talked to that are adamant that they were a part of these school gifted programs for long periods of time, one of them including Walter Bosley. He's the one that was 100% inside of one of these gifted programs that was called MGM in California, that he was forced to take a yellow liquid and then do all of these tests. He ended up in the intelligence community. He ended up working in the Air Force. He ended up being a spook for the CIA, and a counterintelligence agent. Another one, my friend Trey Hudson, same thing. He lived in Florida. He was a part of these programs. Then he ended up working for the DoD. And Walter was told that by his mentor that he had been watched for his entire life. Okay,
this is kind of the basis of one of the sub stories of the TV show Fringe. It wasn't necessarily the government, but you had these two really famous and intelligent scientists that were using drugs to find children that had certain amplified abilities, and the main character, what's her name, Olivia, she ends up becoming an FBI agent who is put in charge of investigating those kinds of programs. I mean, that's just a fictionalized version, but what you're explaining is something that's very real.
And I do believe if these programs were real, that's what it was for. It was to shepherd and herd these people into a certain direction. The military were studying these kids, looking at them to try and put them into leadership roles, just like I was mentioning with that MK Ultra sub project, where they would take all these kids, put them in a camp for an entire summer, and then study them and watch them, see what kind of learning capabilities they had, in order to figure out if any of those kids would be later on put into positions of power within the military or within the intelligence community.
You know what's interesting to me, Ryder, is that technology, scientific concepts, philosophies, these things expand and grow rapidly. Computer technology is a famous example of that. It doubles and doubles and doubles, and it advances quickly. But if you think about just the medical practice itself, we are not more than 100 years removed, if that. It could be less than 100 years, from bloodletting practices. We're less than 100 years removed from putting women into insane asylums because of emotional states. We're less than we're less, I'd say 100 to be really conservative, but we're less than 100 years removed, maybe more like we're still doing it, using mercury as a salve, as a lotion, as a substance to cure diseases, which is arguably one of the things that caused leprosy, exposure to mercury on the skin, and it would cause your skin to literally peel off. I mean, some of this stuff we're still doing today. In fact, when you have a woman that goes to the hospital to give birth, and I make that distinction now because they say men can have babies, but when a woman goes to the hospital to give birth, it's still a very barbaric, they say it's sanitary and it's clean. It's a really barbaric and unsanitary, mentally and physically, condition. Like, a woman should not be laying down on her back unless she feels it's necessary to give birth. People used to stand to give birth or give birth in water, not lay down. My point is, in giving you these examples of bloodletting and things like this, is because, or mercury, we think that these are like barbaric practices that are confined to some historical period, that we've grown out of that. We've learned from our mistakes. But what we're doing today publicly, the stuff we, like I explained at the beginning of the show, Ryder, the stuff we feed kids, the various pharmaceutical drugs, the open public experiments with different types of injections, all of that stuff is the equivalent of modern day bloodletting. It's the equivalent of modern day, we still use it, mercury, or old practices of mercury use, bloodletting, the kinds of things that we think are like, oh, that's barbaric. Why would somebody do that? Well, we're doing the exact same thing today publicly. And if we're doing that kind of thing publicly, and we have no problem experimenting on children and adults, or spraying DDT on kids eating lunch or swimming in a pool, I mean, it just makes me think, I can't even conceive of what goes on behind the scenes. And when you have power and money, and we know of all the programs we know that did exist, and the stuff, the little bit that we know about them that's confirmed, I'm sure that it's really beyond comprehension, the kinds of things that have been done to both children and adults in programs like this, without consent, without knowledge. I mean, I'm sure that you've probably heard of those, the idea of like breeding programs, where a lot of people are, kids are bred for these kinds of experiments. It's not even that they are in school and they're taken out for special classes, or that their kids go missing and end up, kidnapped and end up in some horrible situations. Just like, there's like breeding farms, which actually kind of is partly what Epstein was doing in New Mexico. You could argue that that was part of what he was doing there with wanting to impregnate women and give birth to these children off the grid. So that's maybe a whole different subject, but I just wanted to mention things like these quote barbaric practices. But we still do the exact same type of thing today, and we do these things publicly and openly. So it doesn't take too far of a stretch of the imagination to look at what you're showing me and to think that it's probably 1,000 times worse than what these documents imply and show, especially if the programs went black.
100%. It's way worse than what we could possibly even imagine. I mean, it's a tentacle that expands to multiple different layers and levels that would be very difficult for any one person to figure out every level of it if they don't have the proper documentation or even know where to look there. But my first thought is, well, if you recruit all of the smartest people into your organization, then like, what does that do? Well, one, you're getting rid of all the smart people. You've got all of them. So then you give them a certain boundaries that they can't cross in the military, in these three-letter organizations. So then that stuns innovation. That wrecks people creating new things that could be beneficial to everyone.
You end up with innovation behind the scenes that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of everything else.
There you go. That's what it is. And speaking of like kids and the you just mentioned with the the farms and all that. Well, check this out. China has now developed the world's first pregnancy humanoid. This
I've read
comes
about
to us
this.
from the Daily Mail. That's capable of giving birth to a live baby. Okay. Scientists in China are developing the world's first pregnancy robot capable of carrying a baby to term and giving birth. The humanoid will be equipped with an artificial womb that receives nutrients through a hose, experts said. The prototype is expected to be released next year with a selling price of around 1,000 yen, $10,000, bro.
Wait, 1,000 yen? Or is this Japanese? Oh, yuan.
100,000 yuan or yen or yuan. Is it yuan? Looks like
I
yuan.
don't know how to pronounce it in Chinese. I thought you meant yen, but it's Chinese currency.
He said that the artificial womb technology is already in a mature stage and now needs to be implemented in the robot's abdomen so that a real robot can interact with the act of pregnancy. Okay, so this is
yes,
this a prototype of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I'll bring that back up on the screen, but I wanted to show listeners that yes, this was MIT Technology Review back in 2023. This is what one of them looks like, an artificial womb. So they want to take that, and this is in Japan. This is a Japanese artificial womb. They want to take that and put that into what you showed, which is a robot to make it more humanoid. So these things are artificial wombs that exist separate, and then they want to stick them into a humanoid-like body, from what you're showing me.
And people thought that it was just a conspiracy theory that they had these artificial, babies being born outside of the womb.
You know what? This just made me think of something really interesting. So that artificial womb I just showed you is a Japanese artificial womb. And I wrote a technology book many years ago where I talked about the development of artificial wombs elsewhere in the world. Have you ever noticed that when you read stuff from China, I don't necessarily believe stories coming out of China, but you can read stories from over here in Japan where I am, stuff about and even environmental technologies that just seem like they're so simple. There's no propaganda. It's just like, hey, we designed a plastic that dissolves in water and it's made of like seaweed. Solves the plastic problem. You ever notice that like anywhere else in the world you read about stuff like that, the technology always seems so far advanced. And we know as Americans that we are the wealthiest and probably the most ruthless of any country. And we're sitting here with technology that feels like it's from the 1950s. That's why people come to places like South Korea, China, Japan, and they're like, wow, these people are living in the future. It's like, no, that technology is probably itself really old. In the US, it's just all been gobbled up by corporations. It's been gobbled up by defense contractors, by companies like Apple and Facebook. And that's why we still live in like 1950s technology, but the rest of the world, any developed country, seems to be 50 to 100 years ahead. We have this stuff too. We just don't publicize it as much. That's what I think. I don't know. Do you have a thought on that?
It's really weird. I've noticed that too, and I don't really understand it either, other than that they just don't. They want to see the United States fall and fail, and while all these other countries are just constantly developing new and breakthrough technology. I mean, look at cloning, bro. I mean, cloning was heavily talked about in the 90s. Bill Clinton was talking about cloning. Dolly the sheep. It was a huge thing. They were talking about it when his like human trials going to start, just like how they were talking about anti-gravity and free energy all the way back in the early 1900s. Okay, and then all of a sudden, boop, nothing. Let's just shelve that. Let's just shelve that thing.
Yeah, that's because it went black, I think, just like the other programs we're talking about. It's a really popular thing. People are interested in it. It's for some people it's science fiction. For other people it's just science, and then it just disappears one day. And it almost feels like as an American, it almost feels like we've gone back in time. It almost feels like we've lost technology. It's not lost. It's there. We don't have access to it. I mean, this isn't the point of tonight's show, but the things that you find over here where I am, Ryder, you're just thinking like, why do we not have this in the United States? I don't understand. It makes life so much easier. Why? Well, I think again, because it's all under the control of defense contractors, the aerospace industry, the Pentagon, the military, private corporations you've never heard of before, startups in Silicon Valley, because they have a stranglehold. They have, I don't even know if monopoly is the right word, but they have control of all, I think, control of all of it.
Well, that's the thing
my
too.
assessment.
That's the thing too, is that AI, no one's talking about this. You might have talked about it. I'm not sure, but I've never heard anybody else talk about this. They all talk about AI as in like there's going to be an AI takeover, that the AI is going to take everybody's jobs. No one's talking about how AI is going to invent stuff. AI is going to create things. AI is going to patent things. And AI is going to be used as the scapegoat for the reason why we haven't had all this stuff for a really long time. Okay, so free energy, okay, I'm calling it right now, is going to be created by AI.
That AI will develop it, quote unquote.
Exactly. Anti-gravity craft, which I am very confident we already have. The military has had for freaking 60 years. They've at least been developing it. AI is going to create. See, because that puts a middleman in between, because they can't just come out and say, oh, well, we've had this stuff for a really long time. Here it is. Here it is. The people will be like, what do you mean? How long have you had this? How long have you had this free energy? How long have we been paying for power and all this stuff? Oh. But now we don't have to worry about it because AI cracked the code. AI cracked the code. They found the cure for cancer. They found out how to work free energy. They figured out anti-gravity craft to protect us from the freaking fake alien invasion. Okay? That's just an example. I don't really believe that that's going to happen, but something similar to that is probably going to happen. And people aren't talking about it because they don't see it like that. The AI is going to be the scapegoat for everything, even innovation.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
They're going to be like, oh, AI finally did it. We finally figured out how to do it. The missing link, the researchers and scientists had been looking for and studied for, the people have been donating into this foundation for 40, 50 years, giving all of their money to cancer research. AI just solved it.
And contrarily, you'll find the opposite. You'll find artificial intelligence has informed us that we can't do X. We're not able to cure cancer. You need to take the drugs. We're not able to develop non-fossil fuel technologies. You need to keep, well, they tell you not to use it, but you're going to have to continue to drive your combustion engine vehicle because even the AI can't figure out another option. So you could find that it acts contrarily to that as well. I mean, it's basically already like that with computers. Like, well, I read it online, so it must be true or it must not be true. We rely on artificial intelligence, perceived as a super intelligence compared to the average human. It's really right. I mean, it's really a glorified search engine in a lot of ways, most of the chat bots, but it'll be used for the opposite of that as well. I want to go to the chat really quick, Ryder, because there's a lot of people that have commented in the chat room about their experiences or things they've been through. Jules of Earthly Delights says, I was born in 1990. And in one of those programs, numerous classmates went straight into jobs at the New York Times. Others went to D.C. to work in the federal government.
There you go.
Which is just what we were talking about. I like this. Who is this? Is your real name Peggy in the chat? Because that is Peggy Bundy. That's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Mm-hmm. Peggy in the chat says, I went to school in 2 different states, but both called it the Gifted program.
Yeah, some people it's the Gifted program. Other people, it's called the mentally gifted minds. And see, there's different reasons given in different states as to the decision to put your child inside of one of these programs within public school. They're given different reasons. Some people said that their kid was like super smart and that they needed to be put in like a special class. And then other states where your kid is really stupid he's not learning properly. He has learning disabilities. He's dyslexic. Has ADHD. He needs to be put into a special class.
Yes. Well, and we could also theorize too that whatever is causing the increase in quote autism, people say that is a debilitating condition. Others say that it's the next phase of human evolution. However you interpret that or perceive that, those kinds of states are created clearly by the conditions that we create through food and drugs and medicine and all these other things.
Absolutely.
And then if those kids really are able to access something that is outside of the ordinary and they become extraordinary, then it's almost like we're literally traumatizing, brainwashing, and damaging children to produce those different qualities and states that allow them to access those other realms. In other words, it's kind of like, is the way that I perceive it, the way that I see it. It's kind of like those stories of satanic ritual abuse, where you have to traumatize and abuse and sexually do things to the child in order to get the personality to split. And it's not just satanic ritual abuse, it's also done with drugs as well, and the MK Ultra programs and others. So I think we're doing that collectively as a culture. We're doing that. It's not like a secret program. It feels like we're doing that as a culture, Ryder. It feels like we're doing that to children at every level of grade school, from the moment from the moment they're born until they become an adult. It's not just about programming or making money. I mean, what is it? 1 in 2 are autistic by the end of this decade, according to the CDC. 1 in 2? That's not evolution. That's a synthetic thing that we've created, I think. And I think it ties back perhaps into these programs, which also I want to mention this to you too, because I think it is in line with our idea here of why there's maybe more advanced technology behind the scenes, because this very smart, intelligent people, the high level Da Vinci type people, are found when they're young and brought into programs or the military or whatever, some corporation. You think about what we heard, what was it, a couple of months ago back in May, from the former Bush administration official, Catherine Fitz. And whatever you think of her, I mean, I don't know what to think, but here's just a reminder: the Economic Times, the U.S. spent $21 trillion to build a secret underground doomsday bunker for the elites. And it's more than just a bunker. It's more like it's a network of cities and tunnels. And this is the kind of thing that I had heard rumors of, completely unrelated to anything that I was interested in, because I was only 19 years old. I just started reading weird conspiracy books. I had read UFOs when I was a kid, but weird conspiracy books. And I had people in Tampa, in Orlando, tell me things about MacDill Air Force Base, that there were underground facilities there, tunneling systems that went under the Bay of Tampa all the way down to Miami and all the way down to Cuba, and that they use that to traffic drugs. They use that to traffic people. There are stories. I mean, they're not even stories, actually. That's the wrong word. There are videos and audio. You can watch them, and they've been the subject of a lot of theorizing for decades, of cities all across the world. We're talking the United States. In fact, St. Petersburg, Florida, where right across the bay from where MacDill Air Force Base is, this happened at a baseball game. You get just this weird trumpet-like sound that is blaring in the air. This has been seen and heard in Texas. I want to say Sweden, Texas for sure, Florida for sure. It's been heard in Russia for sure. I think it's been heard in China. But what they classify that weird trumpet sound in the air as, they call it like the venting of exhaust from these underground facilities, because when they're building them, all this toxic gas builds up, so they have to expel it. And when and we're talking massive pipes, massive facilities. And when they expel all that gas, you get that kind of whooshing sound in the air. And that's like official explanations for different things that have happened around the world. This is a global thing. And so when you get someone like Catherine Fitz, who says, yeah, we built a $21 trillion, underground city, I don't think people understand the nature of what she's actually suggesting. $21 trillion is more than half the national debt. And to build something like that, it's possible to do it without people knowing. I mean, the Japanese built the G-cans here in Tokyo without anybody knowing, and it was all underground. And it's like a massive temple complex. It's pretty crazy. So you can do it, but you need really smart people to do it. You need the top, best of the best engineers, and probably almost like city planners. You need everybody who's at the top of their field to do this. You need very advanced technology to be able to do this kind of thing. And so it makes me think, my point is, it makes me think, this is why we don't have any on the surface advances in quote technology. It's why, I mean, I'll give you, I think what a great example would be is over here in Japan, they have the famous Shinkansen, and the Shinkansen has been exported to India and other countries, but the US doesn't want it. They've had the Shinkansen bullet train over here since the 1960s, and it has like an impeccable safety record. I mean, or not even a safety record. It has that too, but it has like an impeccable record of like never having issues. There have been a few, issues with like electrical things, some fire here or there, but it has no record of anything bad happening. They've ran this thing for since the 60s. So that's over almost 3/4 of a century they've had this thing, and it just keeps getting better and better. And we don't have that. We have like Amtrak that is covered in graffiti and smells like urine. You know why that is? We have that because we've spent all of our money and we've sent all of our brilliant people to build whatever the fuck this is. And I think
they would say that the United States is too hilly and there's too many mountains that they couldn't build this this Amtrak fast track bullet train to do it.
Yeah, because Japan isn't a series of volcanoes and mountains, but
oh, I know, but I'm just saying that would be the excuse. It would be like, there's too much terrain here in the United States, you can't do it. But which is another horrible excuse. But we do know that that article that you just brought up could very well be accurate, because they were doing this during the Cold War. And they had one in West Virginia. At the Greenbrier Hotel, there was an underground bunker that was built into the side of the mountain when the hotel was constructed.
Only you and me and a couple of friends that we have, we know that. But yeah, you're right. That's fascinating. People should look at Greenbrier. It's a resort. Is it a resort or it's like a hotel resort? I think that's where the governor's bunker was.
It was the governor's bunker, and it was all of the politicians and the president from Washington, D.C. That's where they would go in case of a nuclear explosion, in case the Cold War escalated to the point where there are nuclear bombs being dropped.
I'm showing it on the screen right now. I also see my friend Teresa just joined the chat. Hello, Teresa. Here is the Greenbrier Resort. You can actually get a tour of the bunker. Have you ever gotten a tour? I never got one.
Yes, I went in.
Oh, you got a tour. Wow, that's really cool. But yeah, you can get a tour of the bunker. Look at that.
But they made this one all in 100% secret. They just blasted out the side of the mountain and then made it to where there was all this construction going on when they were building the hotel. And then they just, it's huge. It's huge. They still have the original bunk beds and like everything in there.
And this, we're talking about the Cold War. We're talking about a time when, I mean, even in a decade, technology advances rapidly. So we're talking how many decades ago, and the amount of time you need to be able to develop the kind of technology to build something like that in the first place. It's like when people look at Göbekli Tepe, they say, well, it's 11,000 so years old. I mean, that's fascinating enough. That takes you back to, I mean, that's the middle of the Younger Dryas, the end of the Ice Age, but it also makes you ask the question, how many thousands of years did you have to develop the technology to be able to do something like that? So, I mean, we've had to have had the technology to do things like this since, I mean, at least it had to have been World War II. It had to have been the 40s and the 50s. There's no possible way you just overnight design something and build something like this. It takes decades to build up the technology to be able to do it, let alone actually to build it. Oh, Ryder, I think you're muted. I think
That
you're
makes
muted.
you think too, like, what about all these other underground places? Like, what about the Paris catacombs? You know, that's a
Yes.
whole bro. Like, there's a whole entire underground city that is just as big as Paris, all underground. Like, there's been rumored that some people have gone in there and have never come out because they've gotten lost
Yeah.
underneath it. So it's like,
Have you ever seen the
when was
Turkish
that built?
tunnels? Have you ever seen those Turkish tunnels?
Yeah,
The
the
ones
ones
in
in
Turkey?
Turkey. Yeah.
Yeah. Derinkuyu tunnels. It's like an entire underground city that's built, carved. I'm showing
Yeah.
them on the screen right now just for audio only listeners. You can, if you want to type this in, Derinkuyu, Derinkuyu. Yeah, and a massive underground complex. By
It
the way,
seems like
they
every
started building.
single
Oh, I'm sorry, Ryder. Go ahead.
oh no, my bad. It seems like every single popular country has a city underneath it. I mean, we know about the cities underneath LA. That's a really big one. There's cities underneath Vegas. Like, who did this? Why did they do this? And now we're still doing the same thing. We're still creating underground cities. I mean, does this go back to the Hopi ant people? Like,
I was just
what?
thinking that because that's right. They came out of the ground, the ant people.
Yeah, and save some of the humans that were on the surface from a huge cataclysm, took them underground, and then resurfaced them after it was safe to come back up.
So this brings a few questions to the forefront of my mind, Ryder. On the screen, you can see that it says in 1958, this is the Greenbrier website. 1958, Congress instructed the Greenbrier to build our West Virginia wing to conceal, you alluded to this, to conceal the construction of emergency Cold War fallout shelter and relocation facility for Congress. So a few things come to my mind. Speaking of Fallout and speaking of the Greenbrier, I've been playing Fallout 76 a lot recently. My high school is in the game. Your hometown is in the game, Point Pleasant, Mothman. It's a really fun game. I don't like that it's all online, but it's a really fun game. And I'm like a big Fallout fan, so I'm really excited for season 2 that's coming out in, I think it's December. And the first season, I don't know, did you see the first season of Fallout?
Yes, I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm glad that they're fast tracking the series.
Yes, me too. And so if anybody doesn't know anything about Fallout, that's okay. You don't have to be a video game fan to know anything about it. But this is what it makes me think. In the first season, taking from the canon and the lore of the actual video game stories, you have a corporation called VaultTech. And I don't want to give too much away for people that might want to go watch it. But this corporation, you find out, it's implied in the show, and it's been speculated on in the games, that the VaultTech Corporation, which was building bunkers for the apocalypse, for nuclear war, this big war between China, Russia, the U.S., that when peace talks started to go very well, and it looked like there wouldn't be an apocalypse, the idea was that VaultTech decided to drop the bombs themselves and to destroy the world, and because they would be able to manage the apocalypse. And that is like the main storyline in the first season of the TV show, based off the games, is that you have these managers that want to be able to manage the end of the world. And they say that time is the ultimate weapon, that we can destroy all of our enemies, and then we can repopulate the world, and we can redesign the world in our image. And they wanted to do, these are like $1 billion-trillion corporations, robotics companies, vault companies, you name it. And I mean, truth is stranger than fiction, but sometimes they're the same thing. And I'm not saying it's predictive programming, but when you read stuff like the $21 trillion underground city network that Catherine Fitz talked about, and we know that there's a long history of this. We just saw Greenbrier, and that was back in 1958. First of all, it's not really that incomprehensible to think that what she's saying is true, or it could even be an understatement. But it also is not unfeasible to think that what you saw in the first season of Stranger Things, of Fallout, isn't really off from whatever the hell this $21 trillion is. Because if you have other countries like China, countries like Japan, just to go to the far, far east, the other side of the world, that are like 75 years advanced on the surface with just transportation, just basic public transportation. The trains in China are arguably better than even Japan, which I don't know if I believe that because of all the lies that come out of China, but nevertheless, it's like 75 years more advanced than the United States. I don't believe the U.S. isn't advanced. I just think we've done it here with this $21 trillion underground. So it's, to me, it really sounds like VaultTech. It sounds like we have a group of corporate managers that have decided to literally go underground to build an entirely different civilization and to let everything on the surface crumble and to let time be the ultimate weapon to destroy all of their enemies. I mean, people speculate it's for an asteroid impact or there's going to be nuclear war. I don't necessarily think any of that. I'm just saying that it feels like we're dealing with the VaultTech Corporation. I mean, and the evidence is, it's weird that something like this would be said after the TV show comes out too, with having no relationship to the TV show. Those kinds of weird synchronicities happen quite often. So these are just things that I think about. I'd like to know what you think, considering that you have seen the TV show. It feels very eerily similar to VaultTech.
Well, I mean, is it that whenever we get to a certain population and things aren't manageable at all anymore, then they just drop the nukes and do a reset and start everything over again? I mean, that could be a possibility. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to do that, but I think that things would have to get way worse. But in the way of like innovation too, I think that looking at it from their perspective and their angle, maybe it's they don't want to be the number one of like innovation and have all the stuff that makes things way easier here in the United States because people already want to come here. Everyone already everywhere in the world wants to come to the United States. They want to live in the United States, even though in some instances, like in Japan, a lot of things are better, which we've talked about several times. There's also disadvantages. No place is 100% perfect, right? But if we were also the number one inventor of all this stuff, and we had all this technology that made the way of life 100 times better than it already is, then there would be nothing but people coming here. Then there would be a huge, really bad overcrowding problem that would be unmanageable. So imagine if we've created the United States as this the best in the world, blah 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 blah. Even though it might not be compared to some other countries, we have the perception that it is. People want to come here. Doesn't matter where you're from. They want to come here. They want to live here, regardless of how great or not great that it may be in some areas. Now imagine that same perception mixed with the way of life being 75 years in the future and us being the only place that's like that.
Letting time destroy everything.
Well, I mean, not only that, dude, like we've talked about this several times too. I mean, look at like Chernobyl, dude, like in 100,000 years, like even in a couple of thousand years, bro, like if everything was just left the way that it is, there's going to be very little remnants of that we even existed.
It's already pretty close to that at Chernobyl now. I mean, it's already pretty close to that in any, I mean, look at Detroit. Look at some of the neighborhoods in Detroit. They're just grown over with trees, and it looks like something from The Last of Us, and that's only been a few decades. There'd be very little left.
If everybody were to be wiped off of the face of the planet right now, let's say no nuclear bomb, but we just all disappeared. We're just all gone. What do you think that things are going to look like in 200 years?
Well, see,
Then
this
what
is
do you
what
think things are going to look like in 1,000 years? And then quadruple that. What is it going to look like in 100,000 years?
here's those pictures of the Turkish underground carved kind of, I guess you could call it a city. I think many people do classify it as a city, Derinkuyu. And it makes me think of, I think I have pictures of the GCAN here in Tokyo. I'm sure you've seen this too, Ryder. Look at this. They call this the temple, and they built this under the city of Tokyo without anybody really knowing it. And it's not like a conspiracy. It's a water flood prevention system. It transports massive quantities of water, but they call that the temple. And so if you, I don't know what to think of the situation in Turkey with the tunnels, but if you were to compare the two, I look at these images and I think, okay, so just for it as just a thought experiment. So the world's destroyed, things get buried, things get covered up, whatever happens, and we go back and we find something in the future. Today we find Derinkuyu, and we look at it and we don't really know what it is. It's what we call it a city. I mean, how much different does that look than the temple, the GCANs in Tokyo? It kind of has a similar feel to it to me. For all we know, that could have been what it was. I mean, I don't think that's what it was. It has rooms. I'm just saying it could have been something like that. We have no idea. So in the future, when someone discovers this, they're going to think it's probably a religious center when it's really just a water transport system to prevent flooding. We have
And that would
absolutely no idea.
be the only thing that would survive in a cataclysm.
Yes, it probably would. Here in Japan, if there was a cataclysmic global event like that, this is probably one of the few things that would survive. It's already underground, it's already protected, and it would just be filled up, and maybe it would be discovered at some point 100,000, 200,000 years ago, or 200,000 years in the future, rather. So I don't know, those kinds of things as thought experiments make me question even some of the alternative narratives about stuff like this. We really don't know. And maybe in some ways it feels like we've taken a different approach to the second half of tonight's show, but I think that we can connect these things together because, like I said, I think we started talking about this, Ryder, because we were saying that all the brilliant people in these programs were taken out and put into the military or put into even into the press, like some of the listeners in the chat were saying, but put into corporations, recruited into these businesses. And that's why it feels like we're so behind in technology, because everything is done underground, literally and figuratively, and behind the scenes. And in other parts of the world, that's not necessarily the case. And so we have a vast amount of technological development that's probably quite literally under our feet. Well, if you're in America, under your feet. And whatever the reason, whatever the purpose is, it might, just a theory, it might be a result of those special programs for kids, of recruiting those people generationally to be able to construct and to build this stuff. And again, whatever the reason is, I don't know if it's war, if it's natural disaster. It's possible that it's a natural disaster. I mean, they keep estimating. There's another study that came out, I think it was back in 2023, where they estimate that there have been massive impacts on planet Earth less than every 100,000 years. I mean, they estimate now it's like it could be 1 or 2 per 100,000 years. Like, we're probably overdue for an impact, or we're close to being due for an impact of like an earth-changing, earth-shattering, civilization-ending strike of something. And perhaps these people know that, and that's why for decades they've known it. So they've constructed this. I don't know if that is the case. I'm just saying I guess that's a possibility. It also could just be people that think that they're far superior to everybody else, like VaultTech, that they want to manage the end of the world, and so they've prepared for it, whatever it is. I don't know. It's just speculation, but I think it does connect to the gifted children programs, because I think those are the people probably involved in constructing a lot of this stuff to some extent.
Well, that's what we got the Space Force, Ryan. That's what we got the Space Force for. It's going to take out that asteroid, bro. And knock that asteroid right off course. I think that if any life-altering, life-changing catastrophe ever happens, it's going to be done on purpose. I think they'll do it on purpose. It'll be altered to happen. I mean, have you read that Adam and Eve CIA document?
No, I didn't know what I know what it is, but I don't know what to think of that.
Yeah, that's a document by the CIA that basically talks about this huge cataclysm that's going to happen sometime in the future, and the only people that are going to survive are going to be on the surface. Will have to be in Colorado, around the Rocky Mountains.
I'm sure people would like me to say Denver Airport.
Denver Airport.
Denver Airport, Denver Airport, Denver Airport. That gets people excited. Well, is that because of the height? The height of Denver?
Yeah, they believe that it's going to be a huge flood, tidal wave, tsunami, some kind of giant flood, sort of like in The Day After Tomorrow, which is one of my favorite catastrophe end of the world movies, where a giant flood comes through, wipes everything out, and then there's a huge freeze.
We are reportedly since 2015, we're supposed to be as a planet heading toward a miniature ice age, and we're also we're supposed to get a close call from Apophis in the next 10 years too, the early 2030s. I think it's like 2032? I should double check that. And I think we're also supposed to see Apophis. Actually, it's 2029 roughly, and I think it's 2032. We're supposed to go through a very dangerous part of the solar system that has been associated with previous cataclysmic events, impacts from large objects. I can't imagine anything else being able to create those kinds of tidal waves.
Are you talking about the second electromagnetic field where the Earth is going to be in like in alignment with other planets, and it's going to create a secondary electromagnetic field?
No, I'm not speaking of that. I'm talking about, I don't remember the name of the actual, I think it's an asteroid belt, but that in 2032 there's a relatively high chance, and that might also have to do with Apophis. I think Apophis is supposed to come by twice, but that there's a very high possibility that there's an impact. I think it's like 1 in 40 that there's a massive impact on Earth in the next 4. I think it's 4 years. But then, if it doesn't happen, then it would happen in 2032, 2033, 2034, somewhere around there. I'm not an expert on this, so these are just things that I've read. But 1 in 40 is a really, really high chance, a really high possibility of something like that happening. In fact, there was just a meteor that came down over Japan 2 days ago, I think it was, in a big fireball. And that kind of stuff just happens. And frankly, I don't think that if something like this was going to impact the Earth, I don't think that anybody would I don't think we'd be informed. I think that they would have a knowledge of this. And I think that it would probably just be preserved for a very select few. And I mean, by the time it hits, there's nothing that you can do about it. It annihilates the planet in a matter of hours, really. So there's no reason to even inform people. I don't know. It's just speculation. It's not something it's not intended to scare people. It's just, I mean, I don't know what other explanation they would have for building such things. $21 trillion of underground facilities is that the Greenbrier didn't cost $1 trillion. So we're talking about cities. We're talking about building an entirely different country underground. What that could be used for and what they have down there. I mean, hell, you're a good person to talk with this about. Maybe Ryder, maybe those stories about Dulce and Area 51 and S2 and S4 and remember Nightmare Hall? Maybe all that stuff's true. Maybe they are aliens. I don't know. That's what was that movie, Captive State, with John Goodman? Did you see that?
Yes.
And they had to build these massive underground cities for the aliens because they couldn't live in our atmosphere.
Yeah, and they had to go underneath the ocean to communicate with the aliens.
Yep. Yep, that's right. John Goodman took that. It was like an elevator thing, or like I don't know what it was, but he had to take that elevator down through and it had to have like an atmospheric suit on, a breathing system, because they couldn't breathe in the alien atmosphere. And they worked behind the scenes. You never saw them. They never made an appearance, but they controlled all the governments because they had extremely advanced technology. You couldn't fight them. They were building all those underground cities. Tell you what, truth is stranger than fiction. It's very, very interesting to think about.
Well,
I'm
I
not,
think
I'm not an
that
executive guy, but this stuff is really interesting to me. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that the cover story for anything is aliens, right? Like if there's any kind of truth to underground bases and all that stuff, it's underground military bases used for some kind of fallout shelter experimentation, doing these freaking AI human embryos and creating AI wombs and making children and all that, which is really interesting because that's kind of like what the Son of Sam. I know you're familiar with the Son of Sam. I watched the new documentary on Netflix the other day, and well, before I get into that, you know about the World's Fairs, right? And the orphan trains. Like, where did all these freaking orphans come from,
Yes.
dude? Why were there so many orphans running around? Why were there so many babies in these freaking incubators? And that you could buy a baby. You could literally go to the World's Fair and buy a baby.
I don't see, we've never talked about this, and I would need to know additional context, but I don't think that it's necessarily as strange as it might appear, because you can already, if you have enough money today, you can already do this. It's not maybe as public because it's more for the wealthy, but you can go I think there are companies in China for sure. I'm sure they're in the US too, where you can pay to have a baby designed. I mean, they actually call them, I can pull up the article, they call them designer babies. So you can essentially buy test tube designer babies already today. I mean, these are stories from like 10 years ago too that I was reading about this. So, I mean, if we're talking about maybe lost technology, I mean, I don't believe that everything we've learned about history is accurate. It's very possible that something equivalent to this was happening in those days as well. I mean, there's all sorts of different stories about this. In fact, some people have been jailed for doing that.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. But it's like, where did all these babies come from? Why are there so many orphans? What are they doing? Why are they all in these incubators? And like, there was this whole network surrounding this kind of stuff where people were told that their parents had died. Right? They were told their entire life that their real parents were that their real parents died, but they really didn't die. So it seems like a program that's like running, like
just like parents that sometimes are told their kids died, but the kids didn't die.
exactly. That's exactly right. But it seems like this program where, okay, well, we'll artificially create all of these kids, we'll genetically engineer them, we'll CRISPR them up. You can purchase these babies, but you have to tell them a certain thing. You're obviously not their real parents. And if you ever want to tell them that you're not their real parents, you got to tell them that their real parents died. And it sounds like a program, like something that is there's something very nefarious behind that. And that's what happened to the Son of Sam killer. Now, regardless if you believe that he's actually the one that did it, because there's a lot of theories and
Sure,
a lot of
sure.
conspiracies around it, but that's what happened to him. He was told that his parents had died. He got involved with this network in New York of all these people, and he was like, I want to find out about my mom. And he said the people asked him, oh well, what happened to your mom? And he said, well, she died. And then the people that were doing the interview or whatever to figure out about his parents just laughed. And he said, why are you laughing? And they said, we've all been told that.
Same story. I want you to look at this. I accidentally took you off the screen. There we go. I want you to look at this, Ryder. So this was it was like a year ago. where the Department of Homeland Security estimated 300,000 immigrant children were missing. That's just immigrant children, 300,000. This is World Population Review. This is a really small underestimate, but this is for all 50 states. Just so far this year, there have been 25,544 missing kids. Now, like with UFOs, this is just my assessment. So if you have a different opinion, let me hear it. But if you have, like the UFO subject, if you sit there and try to explain away what's actually happening here, you have most of the time when kids go missing or when kids are kidnapped, they're usually with people that they know. They're with parents, they're with an uncle, they're with a cousin, there was somebody that they know. Because you consider kidnapping cases to also be when, maybe the father or the mother takes the child when they're not legally supposed to. That's considered kidnapping, although the kid doesn't disappear. They're with a parent, but it's still called kidnapping. You take them across state lines. So when you sit there and you go through all of that's an airplane, that's swamp gas, that kind of stuff, which I think that's a joke. But when you go through all that stuff, you do get a handful of cases, and in this case, probably tens of thousands of cases that are not explainable. Same thing with people missing in the woods. Yeah, it's very easy to go missing in the woods, but it's usually not the case where you go missing in one place and within a short period of time, they find you 300 miles away, or they find a kid. There's a case in the Carolinas a couple of years ago where this kid went missing from the backyard around other people. It just vanished. And then they found him. They looked for remember this story? They looked for him for 3 days, freezing rain. There was even, I think, minor flooding, freezing rain, freezing temperatures. And the kid not only survived, but it was like nothing had even happened to him. He was tangled up in a bush in outside the fence of where the property was in the woods. But they had police, they had family, they looked for this kid. They looked throughout the whole area and could not find him. I mean, that's a whole nother subject, but I guess the point of what I'm getting at here, other than that there's a lot of different reasons for why these things might happen, is that if you're talking about orphan trains, the context of that is kind of like, World War II, and the stories of gulags or concentration camps. Most of the time we're talking about estimated numbers, and we're also talking about, a lot of times we just see pictures. And if you see a picture of a bunch of kids, or you see a picture, what we call the orphan trains or whatever the case might be, once you verify the picture's real, I think the difference between a few cases of that and then the hundreds of thousands of people that go missing for other reasons, I think that there's probably this is just my assessment, I think there's probably a logical reasoning, a logical explanation for those things that are not necessarily part of some larger conspiracy. And again, I think that because today in the modern world where we track everything is tracked. I mean, there are close to 500,000 just in the US, immigrant and people that are citizens, kids that go missing. And that's today. And you don't see them on orphan trains. You don't see them in these programs. Things go underground. I think we're just so, in my opinion, I think we're just so used to seeing things. Like, we have access to so much information that if we don't see it directly, it must be part of some larger conspiracy. Or if we don't know the context of something from the past because we just learned it, it must be part of some larger conspiracy. I'm not saying it's not. I just think that when you compare it to the number of people that go missing today, which is far more than what went missing in the past, or people that were orphaned or whatever the case was, I think there's probably a rational, logical, bizarre reason for that. That's just my assessment. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that even the stranger ones is the people that go missing and disappear in the forest, and then people are looking for them for a really long time, and then their remains are found where they had been searched for.
Yes.
That one, that's really, really weird. And some of the survivors from the missing 411 is some of the most interesting ones. Like, some of the kids that have survived it tell really interesting stories. There was one of this kid that went missing for a while and said that his dead grandma took him into an underground facility. She she had like all these weapons and all this stuff, and like there was like robots and stuff down there, and
I
she
wanna
stayed
start
with
that.
them. Yeah, that one's wild. Then there's a another one of a kid that his grandma heard him like in the distance, and he was missing for like a really long time, and then he was found in like a cave that was like laying down on like a bunch of leaves. He said that that there was like a big hairy man that helped him
Oh, I remember
survive.
that. I remember that, and
Yep.
there's a story similar to that back in the 1800s. I forget the girl's name, maybe Mary or something, but she said that something. I mean, that was 100 years 100 years plus ago, and she said something very similar. Yeah, some large, hairy type, maybe a Bigfoot type creature looked after. I think the kid in Carolina said something similar to that too. In fact, let me see if I can find that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here it is. I just found it. This is. I'll bring this up on the screen. Let's see if I can find the. Actually, that article's not loading. Yeah, so the kid's name was Casey Hathaway, and he said maybe that's what you're referring to, or it's a separate story. Casey Hathaway claims a friendly bear looked after him.
Yes.
This is the kid that was found tangled in like a bush, but he said that the bear took care of him. It's almost like a Bigfoot type thing. I found also that, so this is from the National Council for Adoption, just to provide some context to the orphan trains, which they say was like it was like a welfare program, right? The orphan trains to transport kids from crowded cities to foster homes. That's what they claim that it is. But I'm just trying to be logical about this. So this is today. This is modern data. The historical data, I'm sure, is a lot more difficult to come by. But the National Council for Adoption estimates there are 343,077 children in care, and that's just legal foster care trying to get kids adopted. That's over 250,000 kids. So I mean, just think about that. If you were to take just a tiny percentage of those kids, and you were to move them by train, which we wouldn't do today because we would fly them probably or bus them. But if you were to put them on a train and take some pictures of that, you could come up with the same type of imagery as these orphan trains. You could come up with the same idea that without context, like, oh, there's some larger conspiracy here. But today we have over 250,000 kids that are orphans. I'm trying to bring some reasoning to this, but I'm also
Right, but the thing is orphan means that you don't have a mother or a father. That's what an
they
orphan
died.
means.
Yes,
The these people that are in foster care doesn't mean that they're orphans. It means that they were either taken away, they were unruly kids and unruly childs, they were taken away from their parents. Doesn't mean that that they don't have parents or their parents are dead.
sure,
Orphan
sure.
means something completely different. And that brings up another thing. The teen behavioral modification camps that started in Utah. Okay, that's a very real thing. Kidnapping kids in the middle of the night. Their parents pay these
Yes,
companies large sums of money to come and kidnap their kid out of their bed in the middle of the night, throw handcuffs on them, throw them into the back of a black SUV, and take them to one of these teen behavioral modification schools. And that started in Utah. It was a camp. There's a documentary about it on Netflix. It's called Hell Camp. That's kind of where it started, and then it evolved out of that, and then became like boarding schools and like these schools in like upstate New York and Ivy Ridge and Provo Canyon, which Paris Hilton went to in Utah as well. It's a teen behavioral modification, and it seems like that it's also MK Ultra as well. Like
you would
they would
probably go to those.
traumatize these kids.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that they would traumatize them and make them do things. They would like conform them to like, well, and they were locked down. They weren't able to leave. And a lot of them were there until they were 18 years old, and they got a fake diploma. Their diplomas weren't even real. They were fake diplomas. So they were
Well,
there. They would learn from a computer 7 days a week. There were no teachers. They would do everything. They would learn everything from a computer. then whenever they were getting ready to graduate, then they could leave. Once they turned 18, they were, officially an adult, and they wouldn't be able to be held there against their will anymore because they're an adult. And then they would be given a diploma that wasn't even a real diploma. It's so sickening.
That is so bizarre. I've heard about that. Maybe you told me about that one time. I was also, so I looked up. You're right. Obviously there's a difference between orphans and people in the foster care system. But there's an estimate in the U.S. We just have an estimate. We don't know for sure, but it's like I think it's 2.1 million, according to Nature Medicine in 2021. Let me double check this. 2.9 million orphans in the U.S. So there's actually more orphans than there are kids in the foster care system. So there are a lot of orphans today too. Plus, I mean, I don't know. You got to think about the time period in which that orphan train thing was happening. If we're talking about the mid 1800s to the early 1900s, you're talking about a time when we still had not perfected. We haven't even done it today, but perfected hygiene and sanitation. So and people worked ridiculous hours. Kids worked in factories, and parents didn't always come home from factories. And so a lot of kids might have been orphaned because their parents died at work or died in terrible conditions. I mean, you look at if you look at New York, London was worse, but if you look at New York in the 1800s and the early 1900s, I mean, it was a shanty town. People literally lived in like sewage-ridden basements. There's like sewage on the floor. It's disgusting. Like a family of 15, 20 people, extended family, would share one toilet that didn't even flush half the time. So that could also contribute to why there were so many orphans or so many people. That I'm just trying to look at it from a different point of view is all that I'm saying. But the other stuff that you're adding, I agree with you. And that's the reason we had, the show set up for tonight, because a lot of people do get drawn into those types of experiments and programs. And I think it just makes logical sense that those kinds of things exist because of what we do publicly to kids, what we do publicly to adults. Why wouldn't this stuff be done behind the scenes? Anyway, though, I just I don't buy the orphan train conspiracy, whatever that might be. But I wanted to add that. We could talk about the World's Fair stuff because I have some perspectives on that. But anyway, go ahead.
No, it's just interesting that no one ever has figured out where the kids came from. Like, where did the babies come from? Why were there so many babies? Why were they all in incubators? And why could you buy a baby? And why did people act like they had never seen a baby before in their life? Like, it's a very strange amount of things that are going on there. And I'm not saying that there is any conspiracies about it, but if you're talking about a repopulation of the world after a global cataclysm, that's what you would do. You would put babies out for sale because you needed to repopulate the world and give babies, and there would be all these orphans, right? That came from wherever. Okay. And if you look at like the whole thing of the Sumerian kings list and how it was all, after a big cataclysm, they would ordain a person and they would bring back down the knowledge. I mean, maybe that's not something that's like literal. Maybe that's meaning like a reseeding of the population. Maybe that's not like knowledge like we think that it means. Maybe it's like an actual reseeding of people because they've all died, whether that be a cataclysm, a sickness, or whatever. They were just all wiped out, and then the population needed to be reseeded again. It's interesting. I'm not saying that it's fact or even that I believe it. I just think that it's an interesting theory and an interesting proposition to have. But 100% the kidnapping of children has happened. It's that was a part of the teen behavioral modification camps and the schools. That is real, which is a part of the Institute TV series on MGM Plus. So, like, that's how it opens up, is a kid being kidnapped out of his bed at his parents' house. That's verifiable. We have the document that I just showed you that it's kind of speculation whether the Sunstreak document, whether that's has to do with SRI actually testing kids. We have what people are being triggered with, which is the voice of the Monroe Institute gateway tapes, the hemisync tapes, that is verifiable. How people are remembering the gateway hemisync tapes in public school Who knows? How did that happen? Did the SRI have a contract with the Monroe Institute? The Monroe Institute have a contract with the government, which then in turn would be a contract with the public schools and the education system. I mean, that would be the way to do it. You would test these kids in a public setting. You would tell their parents that they were a part of some sort of, that they're very special or they're very stupid, depending on which state that you're in and depending on the conditions and the way that they were raised, the types of trauma that they would have. You would give a different explanation depending on where in the country you're raised and born and where you live. Then it would bring that, then that way you can get all the smart kids and the people that could make any great large impact out of the from keeping any kind of innovation. So then you would have them working for you, and you would be able to stifle any kind of real change that could possibly be made in the future. And that's just one level to it. That's just one layer to the whole thing. There's many other layers to it that I haven't quite nailed down yet, but that's my first one, because several people, like I mentioned, that I've talked to, Kristan, what's up? Why does Ryder look like he's in the basement always? Always in the basement, bro. It's because I don't have any lights.
He's in one of the underground bunkers.
I've been in the $7 trillion made underground bunkers that the
Yours
government
costs $21, not 21 trillion.
That's right. 21. About $1,500. About $1,500.
Yeah. By the way, the microphone sounds really good tonight. I think it's better than your old setup for sure. So I hope that you're happy with it. I hope that it sounds good to you. Hope everybody in the chat room is enjoying the show tonight. Just as a reminder, because we're going into the third hour here, we'll complete. If you want to stay, you can. If you'd like to leave, you can. It's up to you, Ryder. You're free to stay. You're welcome to stay. But we have the rest of this third hour. You're listening to The Secret Teachings. Most of our audience, the mass majority of our audience, is listening audio only. Most of them know that on Friday nights, you can get the live video stream of the show on social media. Links are at tstradio.info. You can email me at rdgable@yahoo.com. If you're watching the video, you can scroll down below the video and you can click on the links to pretty much everything about the show, books, archives, etc. Some people find us on YouTube and they say, why don't you have other shows? Why do you just do one show a week? We don't. 5 shows a week. It's in the archive. It's down below. And if you're in the audio portion of the show, you say, well, why don't I see the video? It's because you're listening to an MP3 file. You got to go to the social media page or the website to find the video of the show. tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. rdgable@yahoo.com. Tonight we have Ryder Lee, who I've put I think I didn't even notice that it posted, but down below your name there, we got host of Raised by Giants. That's what you are, the host of Raised by Giants. Tell us a little bit really quick about your show and the new documentary, and then we can finish our conversation for this hour, because you haven't got to promote yourself really. So go ahead, take the time now.
You can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. You can also watch my 2 documentaries, JFKX Solving the Crime of the Century, on Apple TV Plus, Amazon, and Tubi, and my latest documentary, Clockwork Shining, also on those same platforms. And my new documentary, Psychic Agent, The Real Life Stranger Things, I am currently working on. I am in filming production, so hopefully that will be released before the end of the year.